So here we were, in November 2019, setting out for the first time ever with the explicit purpose of making a video, following the instructions from track 10 in the book of four-wheel drive trips. The trip of course took freaking ages, because we stopped to change the camera mounting about every 50 meters, and repeatedly ruined each other's shots by doing the wrong thing, pressing the wrong buttons, and having the camera in the wrong mode. We got many gigabytes of footage that day. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. Oh, and what's the reason why you see this shot and not the one from the camera on the bull bar? Well, it wasn't actually recording. It ran out of battery. But then creative differences occurred. We decided to have separate channels. But we both wanted to produce something, so instead we got two versions of the same video, with very different editing and very different music. Was it an intense four-wheel drive trip through the forest? Or was it a pleasant Sunday drive? Your choice entirely. The next video, Update in the Park, was me on jumping stilts, walking around a park telling the story so far at that point. I realised that there hadn't been another video for quite a while after the first one, so I decided to make one about what's to come. I've got a trip later next year planned to go up Cape York. Needless to say, hasn't happened yet, and I realised a while ago I never did make that video about how to make coffee. It's coming, I swear.
That's crazy.
Saunders Gorge, the Eagle View four-wheel drive track. Coming back to see family in Adelaide over Christmas 2019. Well, what good is driving your four-wheel drive over there if you can't show off what it can do? While South Australia has some iconic four-wheel driving destinations, none of them are actually anywhere near Adelaide. Unlike Victoria, all of their fire and land management trails are all gated and not for public use, and their state forests don't allow anywhere near the range of activities that ours do. Four-wheel driving is practically out of the question. You're lucky if walking is allowed. So we found out about Saunders Gorge, a privately owned conservation park that has a four-wheel drive track around it, and we booked in for a lap. This is by far our most viewed video. Analytics revealed that it mostly comes from search traffic. Understandable, because when we decided to have a look on YouTube for videos of it before we went in order to gauge difficulty, we didn't find much. We hadn't yet fitted lifted suspension in the Land Cruiser, and it was riding pretty low due to the heavy bull bar and rear bar it had been fitted with, so we decided to skip the harder sections. Later measurements actually showed that it was 2 inches below stock at that point, which is, we'll have to go back there someday and check that out again. Also, somewhere out there is the top of the first whip antenna we had. It was a prototype with an issue where it bends right on the lower threads of it, so it snapped off there. Somewhere out there. The HF contact. So we had a video here with me on the other end, and XSS on the other end, somewhere out at Tobermory Station in the Northern Territory, with no other means of contacting the outside world other than HF radio. I was hoping to multicam this one to show the contact from both ends, but the other end was so rushed to make the previously agreed schedule time that they didn't end up being able to film anything, so, well, there wasn't much of a video here, it never really went up, really wasn't very exciting. So the Grampians series. There was actually a trip before this one, which was kind of a test run in Mount Buangor State Park. We wanted to get a campsite, but it was a long weekend, and it was just before a long weekend, so it had to be somewhere unexciting enough to not be fully booked out, but exciting enough to be worth going to. We did a day trip into the Grampians from there, and we walked the Pinnacle. After this, I wanted to come back and do the Grampians properly. I mean, we'd been there for a day or two before, and I had an extensive history of family trips there. I was between jobs at the time in early February, and decided to plan a few things before full-time employment resumed. XSS had a contract role at that time that was 1 day a week, and so we decided to make the most of it, before we were both back to full-time work. A trip to the Grampians was extensively planned. At this point I hadn't even edited the Saunders Gorge video, but liking at least the concept of making more, we set off. This was great fun, and I did a walk I'd always wanted to do. I'd always looked at the top of that mountain range from the Pinnacle, and I've always wondered what it would be like to be over there on the other side. Ironically, in this trip, we didn't do the Pinnacle, making it the rare Grampians trip that didn't. So this produced day 1, day 2, day 3, and with 4 and 5 being rolled into one video. Oh, and there's one thing which I wish I had made clearer in those videos. A lot of people have said to me, "Oh, I'd love to go there, but I don't have a four-wheel drive." Now, there's actually nowhere in that series you can't get to without a four-wheel drive. You just might not be able to go the same way we went. The exception is this lookout, but even then, you just can't drive up to it, you can just park at the bottom of the hill and walk up. So then, the Coorong. Late February, after a conversation about beach driving, we realised that we could actually be in the Coorong tomorrow if we wanted to. And then, tomorrow, we were. One of the things South Australia does allow more of is driving on beaches, and the Coorong isn't that far over the Victorian border. Comparatively, there is no beach in all of Victoria that allows driving on the sand. In fact, there's only one place you can drive on sand at all, the privately owned Portland Dunes. Much driving on the Coorong sand was done, and a lot of fun was had camping there, setting out to see the local sights. Next up was Port Elliot. Surprisingly for such a popular beach, there's actually a section of it which allows driving. There's been talk of it being banned here for a long time, and the gutter press has regularly printed accusations that the surf lifesavers spend more time rescuing stuck four-wheel drives than rescuing people from the water. Now, personally, I'd say that this might have something to do with the conditions in the water at that beach being pretty mild even on a bad day, but on the other hand, we had locals ask what we were doing when we were airing down and back up again. Maybe some signage about tyre pressures and one of those petrol station style air pumps wouldn't go astray here. It'd probably prevent 90% of the incidents before they even happened. On our way back, we realised that there was actually no reason we couldn't stay out another day. We located a campsite in Little Desert National Park. Staying there was actually the first time we decided to look up exactly what this COVID-19 thing was, and why people were so worried about it globally. It didn't seem to be much of a threat to Australia at that point. Oh, and I still hadn't edited the footage from the Grampians yet, which explains why these videos actually came out in March, if you're wondering. The ozone sonde recovery. Having Wednesday afternoons free meant we could start chasing an ozone sonde from when it was launched, not just starting with it on the ground by the time we could get out after work. I made a quick video of a chase we did on the 11th of March 2020, but that would prove to be the last for a while. We were meaning to make this video sometime in January, and we have some other footage collected from the 3rd of January, where we plan to collect the following week's sonde as well. Now, I've always thought that a lot of YouTube channels have two sets of videos. Some major event inevitably occurs that divides everything into before the incident and after the incident. Well, Friday the 13th of March. Spectators queue outside Albert Park in Melbourne for the Grand Prix. The event is then cancelled at the last minute. Smart Traveller issues an advisory that all Australians should avoid unnecessary international travel. The 15th of March brings an announcement that all international arrivals will be required to self-isolate for 14 days, a concept that most of us had to look up the meaning of at the time. On the 18th of March, we went and got new tyres on the four-wheel drive. Concern locally was still somewhat minor, consisting mainly of door handles being sprayed down and posters saying not to enter if you have symptoms. We waited for the tyres to be fitted, sitting in a nearby park so as not to be in the room with everyone else. A level of concern was slowly setting in, hand sanitizer was being bought up by the bucket load, but everything else was determined to proceed as normal. Rumours were circulating that Australia would shortly be in lockdown. The Prime Minister brushed them off, and in an infamous moment said he was still going to the football. He too cancelled at the last minute, stating that it might be misinterpreted. Travel advice is upgraded to do not travel, and a cruise ship arrives in Sydney Harbour. On board said cruise ship, 110 passengers are complaining of flu-like symptoms. They are swabbed and tested for the flu, which comes up negative, so the government gives the cruise ship the OK to let all the passengers disembark, before anyone thinks of testing the swabs for COVID. That ship was the Ruby Princess. By the 24th of March, COVID was now spreading around Australia. Restrictions shut a large number of retailers and other companies. International travel was now banned. Some states closed borders to other states. Going outside without an essential purpose was now illegal. It wasn't until the 16th of April that we even had any idea how long this was going to last for. It was announced that restrictions would be released in 4 weeks' time, provided that COVID spread reduces. And it wasn't until late May when we went out again, for a drive through Toolangi State Forest. We didn't film this one, we just wanted to get outside. I had since started a new job, working fully remote from home, but it certainly felt at this point like there weren't even weekdays and weekends, just days with and without work to do. And then things went badly wrong again. On July the 1st, certain postcodes in Melbourne were to be locked down, with COVID spreading yet again, but there were exemptions for leaving those postcodes to go to work. As workplace transmission was a significant factor in previous spread, many were saying this just wouldn't work. They were right. July the 8th and all of Melbourne was now back in lockdown. There was a very annoyed sense of deja vu here, and case numbers kept rising, even under lockdown. Anecdotally at the time, while everyone seemed concerned about COVID, practically to the extent of paranoia during the first lockdown, the second time a lot of people just didn't care, with many openly disobeying the rules. This was reflected in the R values, and after about 700 new cases in a single day, stricter restrictions were introduced. An 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew applied, as well as a 5-kilometre distance limit. Nobody was to go more than 5 kilometres from their home, 1 hour of exercise a day, 1 household member to the shops once per day. What does this have to do with the channel? Well, with all of that in place, we sure weren't going anywhere for a while.